So, I'm sitting here in my gas mask cruising Reddit because my neighbor is a moron. What nightmare neighbor stories do you have? It's Em here. Please enjoy and let me know any thoughts you have in the comments below. Story 1. My neighbor isn't the greatest. The house across the street is sort of a duplex. There's a creepy old man in the front who gets wasted off his butt every night and sometimes comes and professes his love to me. While sober, he's a super sweet and helpful old guy, but get a couple drinks in him and he's a nutbag. One night, he had Eye the Tiger blasting while he was karate chopping and spin kicking the air. I was sort of amazed at his agility, regardless of how sloppy. A random man walked down the street and he told him he was gonna punch his face in, then did some sort of tuck and roll and hi-ya the air. Just this afternoon, he came stumbling over, asked why I didn't come talk to him. I'm always courteous towards him. I don't believe in disrespecting my elders. I don't really feel in danger. I just think he's lonely. When I tell him I have a boyfriend, he just responds saying he doesn't mind. He just loves me. The people who live in the back of the house is his COKE head daughter and her similar boyfriend and her 2-year-old. I'm on the verge of calling CPS considering they have literally fought from 11 p.m. at night until 5 a.m. outside, up and down the street, leaving the poor baby in the house by herself with the door wide open. I thought she's being babysat by the old man until I saw him pull up, shake his head at the two, and go in and get his granddaughter. The mother has left that baby outside in her stroller by herself, while she's in the home doing God knows what. I'll sit on my porch and watch the baby to make sure nothing happens to her, and to make sure her mom comes back out to get her in a relatively timely manner. The situation makes me sick to my stomach. The reason I'm hesitant to call CPS now is I'm a single mom, and my daughter is with me almost full time. I'm afraid of starting a war with them, but I definitely keep an eye on that house quietly to protect my own little girl. I'm not sure how much I can do legally and safely. I wish I could go get her and take care of her myself. I'm relatively new to the area, so I'm just now recognizing these problems, as well as my next door neighbor, keeping me informed since she's nosy and doesn't work. So she's got time on her hands. I've seen and heard crazy things in this neighborhood. There's fighting going outside right now. Had to pause this comment to go help a neighbor. I know this comment will be buried and it's long-winded and all over the place, but dang, it feels good to get that off my chest, lol. Too long, didn't read. My neighborhood sucks. Somebody commented, get out before it's too late. You're living on a powder keg. Yeah, I agree with this commenter. OP, it might be smart to start looking for a new place sooner rather than later. This guy might be harmless, air quotes obviously, right now, but there is no telling what he might choose to do one night after you reject him again. Add this into his obviously unwell family that is literally abusing their child, and it almost seems like you are setting yourself up for disaster. I would suggest moving ASAP and then calling CPS for that child. Otherwise, you are just letting a child get hurt and doing nothing about it. Story 2. When I was 14, I lived in a duplex with an elderly woman and her husband. My family and I on the bottom floor. She had smoked when younger and was in possession of oxygen tanks and an obvious past drug user. Now, we knew she wasn't the greatest of people from day one, but her husband was an awesome, also elderly man. He collected scrap metal, and one day, when locked out, he climbed to the second story, Spider-Man style, and went in through the window. The year we moved into the house was turbulent for my family, but we were okay. My mother was with her dying grandmother over Thanksgiving, and the same time and day her grandmother died. So did this woman's husband. We offered condolences and part of our Thanksgiving meal to her, and we had always been kind to them. Christmas wasn't the greatest to begin with that year, but it would end tragically. Around 10 p.m. Christmas night, we were going to head to bed, all of us tired. But my sister insisted we watch the movie she had bought for me, the Goonies box set, and so we put it on. Opening credits, my mom smells something, and my father heads to the kitchen window. It smells smoky. I immediately head to the room in between the two houses, and the door to this lady's apartment is wide open, filled with smoke and fire spitting from the stairs. I call 911, get my dogs out of the house, and my dad rushes upstairs with a fire extinguisher ready to pull this woman out of a burning building. Turns out the fire had been burning for 30 minutes. And this lady had tried to put it out for 20 minutes, then ran across the street to her drug-addicted friend's house. No one calls the fire department. No one tells us. You literally cannot leave the building without passing that door. She made an active decision to leave us. All the neighbors thought the police had been called, and soon enough, everyone in town was at my house, staring at me in my house in my Christmas pajamas, watching my house burn. My mother upset shouts, "Oh my God, the house is on fire!" Shocked. The woman turns to her and says, "What are you talking about? My house is on fire." In the process of recovering our things in the freezing weather of a New York winter, this woman tries to steal from us twice. From the wreckage of our charred, severely water-damaged home. That is my worst neighbor experience. Somebody commented, "It's a very good thing you stayed up to watch the Goonies." Once again, they saved a life. Seriously, count your blessings. Your sister insisted on staying up. Otherwise, chances are that you would have slept through and only woken up when the smoke became too thick, that you would not have been able to make it out. I hope you were able to get that woman in some kind of trouble. Maybe not exactly for abandoning you, because I do not know how you could argue that in court, but at least for trying to steal from you. My guess is that maybe she wanted to collect the renter's insurance on the house if it burned down, but either forgot about Opie's family or just didn't want to split the money. Story 3. I lived in the basement suite of a fourplex, and the people above me were awful, as was my roommate, but that's a totally different story. The guy's alarm would go off every day at 5:30 a.m. It would go off continuously for 2 hours, when he would actually get up around 8. No snooze button or anything, just constantly blaring the entire time. On multiple occasions, I would get mad enough to go up and bang on his door, to get him up and shut off the alarm. He was nice, but never changed, until he got a roommate. She was a adult worker, which I don't really harbor any negative opinions over. The problem was that she did her business at home, and my room was directly under hers. Sometimes I would be outside having a cigarette, and these guys would come out with their head down and scurry off. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night to someone outside my window tapping on hers, which was above mine, to get her to answer the door. I would hear her frickin' dudes almost every day. But the worst part of it all was that the only song I ever heard her listen to, ever, was Creed with Arms Wide Open. Every day, that song at least a few times. Day and night. I still cringe thinking about it. Somebody commented, "Oh God, anything but Creed." Yeah, honestly, the Creed thing might be the biggest crime in this story, not her occupation. I won't pass any judgments on her because it's not my place. But I do feel like there was a better way to hide that kind of business, because for all the lady knew, OP was a cop or was gonna snitch on her, all because she kept being woken up by creepy people knocking on the window. Story 4. This past summer, my neighbors had neglected a yappy dog they adopted the year before. Now, please understand that we do not live directly beside our neighbors, and we didn't see that they weren't giving their dog water and food on a regular basis. The July heat rolls around, and we noticed that the dog disappeared from its usual perch beside their house. A week or so later, we start smelling this foul stench coming from their yard in a tall patch of bush. My father drove his ATV through the bush and discovered the stench coming from a black garbage bag. He calls the police and they come to investigate. They determine it's their dog. It had liquefied due to the heat wave. A conservation agent pays our neighbors a visit and notifies them that they have until 5 p.m. to dispose of the animal. So, here is the best part. My lovely neighbors set the liquefied dog aflame. We guess they poured gas in the bag and lit a match and walked away. It broke my heart when they got another dog a month later. Too long, didn't read. Neighbors neglected their dog, it passed away. Then the lovely neighbors set it on fire. Somebody commented, "This is why I keep a dog at close hand when redditing. Emergency hug situations." Story 5. I live next to this woman who was extremely irresponsible. Had 4 noisy children and her mother all occupying the same space, all day long. I got to listen to children screaming and throwing things, and her yelling obscenities at them. And all night long, I got to listen to her blast music and fight with people. It was unending. It was never quiet for very long. I couldn't really call the police because they wouldn't do anything when I did call them. And my neighbors would punish me for calling by smearing dog crap on my door and leaving garbage around my front step. I was the new guy living in the complex, and a lot of people were noisy like her. So she knew it was me calling the cops. Eventually, you just learn to sleep with Kesha blasting through the paper-thin walls. I was so glad when I finally moved out. Somebody commented, "You should have pea frisbee that mess." Freeze your pea in a frisbee, decant it onto some wax paper, slide it under the door, then work the paper back out. I have never heard of a pea frisbee, but I'm so glad I have now. But yeah, it sucks when you can't punish people who obviously deserve it. The only thing OP maybe could have done was put up a door camera and record the people smearing poop. and then sued them for vandalism or something. But hey, at least the lady wasn't playing Creed. Story 6. I live next to a bitter old man, probably about 78 years old. When we let our dogs out, usually it's just for a few minutes so they can do their business. But it was one of the first nice days we had in a while, so we let them be outside for a while. They both went to the front of our house to lay in the sun, although they'd never gone off our property. I guess our neighbor was spraying his lawn with weed killer, because he walked over to where our dogs were laying and sprayed it in their faces. Their cries and whimpers were one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever heard. They sounded like they were in so much pain. And I was in my room when it happened. My mom saw what was happening, stormed outside, and started screaming through tears at him. My mom is usually a very calm person. I've never heard her that upset. She took the dogs to the closest vet, and thankfully they're both okay still. Somebody commented, "That's pretty freaked up." Story 7. My neighbor from behind my mom's house once literally asked her, "Why don't you use the master bedroom? I never see you go in there with my binoculars." He wasn't joking. She actually doesn't use the master bedroom, which is visible from his back window. On top of that, he's also probably a racist. He started harassing the repair guy from DirecTV, who happens to be black. This guy had a uniform, expensive equipment, and everything. He claimed he looked like he was doing something suspicious. Oddly enough, he didn't seem to think that the white kid who did try to break in broad daylight no less, was suspicious. On top of that, he asked my mom one morning if he could have his lawn man remove a tree that he didn't like. Seeing as how it was on our property, even the branches, it was small. On that strip of land next to driveways, she said no. 3 hours later, buzz. What the heck was even the point of asking? Sounds like this guy had the hots for your mom and wanted to let her know. I hope your mom thought to put up thicker curtains or something to keep him from looking in. Story 8. While I was going to college, I lived in my mom's apartment with her. The building only had 4 units in it. Her neighbors across the hall and down one floor would perform sexual Olympics on an almost nightly basis. I'm talking out of proportion, screaming and banging on the walls. Think of the most OTT pornographic film you can, and you may be close. It was obviously done so that people would hear it. Same neighbors were selling weed out of their apartment, which was right across the hall from where the landlady lived. They left a quart-sized Ziploc bag full of the stuff out on the front porch one day, apparently for someone to pick up. It was hidden in a potted plant. The landlady found it, knew what it was, and threw it out. I can only imagine their panic. Also, since they were shady as heck, they found my mother's phone number on a piece of trash, I'm assuming, and gave it to debt collectors as their primary phone number. Story 9. Austin, Texas. I live in a duplex behind shows on North Lamar. I work pretty early and on the weekends, and generally go to bed around 11 p.m. This Friday night, my neighbors in the duplex on the far side of me threw a welcome home from jail party for somebody. Sure enough, loud music late at night, but I figure, it's Friday. People should be able to party. Plus, like the Blues Brothers say, backyard fence with. He comes out and tells them to shut the frick up, but angry words are shouted back and forth. Things are thrown kind of across my yard. Pretty soon, it becomes a threat. At this point, I start to get the phone and dial. I will frickin' butt in 512 grips. Think that's what was said? In the 512. So am no craw. We'll come on over and have a beer. Crisis averted, music turned down, no double murders that night. Too long didn't read, murders averted by gang. Somebody commented, "I've heard this exact story before, told almost verbatim. You and I, we know each other somehow." I'm not really sure what was said, but hey, at least no one got hurt, so that's a relief. Story 10. We live in a wooded neighborhood about 30 minutes from the nearest large city, 15 from the nearest town, and less than a minute from a volunteer fire department. For many years, there were no houses within sight of ours. We had empty lots on either side, and trees and tall grass between the front and back. Then someone buys the land to one side of us, spends months getting it ready, very loudly I might add, then put an ugly mobile home right by the fence. They then let their large dog roam free. This wouldn't be a problem, except he loves to dig under the fence and jump on us. Fast forward a year or two, after many times of them chaining the dog up, and it is still getting in our yard, it kills our Chihuahua mix. Not long after, they moved out. Story 11. By the way, this is a comment that's related to the title of the post about the OP wearing a gas mask. In the next few days or weeks, there's a very good chance you'll start smelling some paint fumes or polyurethane solvent. Seems like a reasonable thing to do after the sanding is done. Lay out a bit of paint. Now, you don't want these fumes stinking up your crib. I recommend taking every fan you can beg or borrow, steal, and set them up blowing into your apartment. just to keep the fumes down, of course. Positive pressure. It's a bit unfortunate, but some of this massive dust cloud, especially the crap that's stuck in the cracks between the floors, just might get returned along with the fumes and convert all that fresh new shiny paint into a nice gritty sandpaper finish. Story 12. When I was in high school, my parents had a house built. While it was being built, we lived in a little Monopoly-style rental house. The neighbor next door had parties that would run from Friday evening until Sunday evening, with loud music and lots of people. My parents complained to the police, and apparently they set up DUI checkpoints on both sides of the street because they had one last party, and that was pretty much that. Some friends in college lived next to some girl who was dating a football player. They got into epic fights, and occasionally it sounded like he was gonna push her into their apartment through the wall. Geez, OP, that last part is just so sad. I understand why they're probably hesitant to help the girl, but I wish we knew if she was able to get out, or at least get some help. Story 13. I once lived in an apartment where the wall was thin. The neighbor's bathroom was in the same wall as my bedroom. The neighbor had the loudest flatulence I've ever heard in my life, and he liked to come home late at night, run a bath, and let it all rip. He could hear me rolling on the floor laughing, and he'd be like, "It's not funny, dude." Anytime we saw each other around the complex, it would be kind of awkward. Somebody commented, "I'm sitting here imagining your neighbor sitting naked in the bathtub yelling at you through the wall." Story 14. If that building was built prior to 1978, you may be exposed to lead from the paint dust. This would be an extremely dangerous situation that could result in your major health problems. If this is the case, it would be a violation of the EPA's Renovate Right program, and likely violations of your local clean air laws, Department of Ecology laws, and other applicable environmental regulations. You should really get this checked out. Source, I am a Washington State Certified Lead Inspector and Risk Assessor. OP commented, building was built in 1912. Woot. Story 15. I had a neighbor who had a drug-induced mental break and decided to break into my house in the middle of the night. He was in serious tinfoil hat territory. Told me that aliens that were beaming the movies into his brain said he had to come talk to me. Took me several attempts to get him off of the proverbial ledge, but eventually, I had to get the cops involved. Downward spirals are terrifying to witness. Yeah, these are the kinds of situations that are sometimes best left up to the professionals, who can get these people the real help they need, whether that's therapy or some serious medication. It's hard to want to be a good person and help, but at some point you just realize you won't be able to help enough. Story 16. Neighbors had a giant METH lab built under their rented house, including, but not exclusively, fake walls, burnt furniture from an explosion, huge amounts of chemical burns in the backyard, and later a newborn baby. All of it in a very, very, very suburban upper middle class area. Somebody commented, I didn't know Walt brought Holly to Jesse's house for him to babysit. Story 17. My neighbors have 3 people in the house, but somehow have acquired 6 vehicles. They have lots of visitors who arrive on a semi-regular basis, stay for a short time, then leave again. They are always noisy, argue, and are slobs. Worst neighbors ever. I can't wait to sell this house and move. Somebody commented, those are called drug dealers. Story 18. Some of my neighbors across the street are drug dealers, and a guy confused their address with an old guy in the same complex and murdered the old man with a machete. I can think of a few things less neighborly than killing someone with a machete. I'm moving when my lease is up. That poor old man. I can't imagine learning that someone of your family or friends were killed because they had the address mixed up. I also just want to know how those people probably broke in and didn't get confused when they saw a little old man at the table instead of a group of drug dealers. Story 19. Once I came home and the SWAT team was surrounding my building. My downstairs neighbor was holed up with a lot of ammo and was threatening to kill his wife and kid by shooting into the ceiling. Story 20. What kind of amazing place do you live in? I love it. Very beautiful. Get the pups or kitty out of there too. Don't let them breathe that stuff either. Story 21. I know this isn't helpful, but your apartment is awesome, but call the cops. It's not extreme. He is doing illegal construction work without a permit. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.